July 16th, 1945, 3 in the morning, the New Mexico desert. A metal tower stands alone in the darkness of the Jornada del Muerto Basin, the journey of the dead man, 60 miles from the nearest town. At its top sits a device the size of a large automobile, assembled from components no single engineer fully understands, designed to do something that has never been done before in the history of the planet. The scientists gathered below it have placed bets on whether the atmosphere itself will catch fire. Several of them genuinely believe it might. At 5:29 in the morning, the device activates. The light that follows is described by men who have seen every variety of explosion imaginable as something that belongs to a different category of experience entirely. It is not bright. It is not a flash. It is the sudden creation of a second sun, appearing from the desert floor and expanding outward in absolute silence for nearly a full second before the sound arrives. A pressure wave that knocks men off their feet 40 miles away and rattles windows in Albuquerque. The bomb works. The war in the Pacific has been going on for nearly 4 years. American forces are island hopping toward the Japanese home islands in a campaign of grinding, methodical destruction. The projected invasion of Japan, Operation Downfall, is being planned with full awareness that it will likely cost over 1 million American casualties and potentially 3 times that on the Japanese side. The men making these calculations are not comfortable with them. They need the bomb delivered. The vessel selected for this assignment is the USS Indianapolis, CA-35, a Portland-class heavy cruiser, 610 feet long, 9,700 tons, armed with 9 8-inch guns and capable of 32 knots. She has already fought her way across the Pacific, survived kamikaze strikes off Okinawa, helped cover the Iwo Jima landing, participated in the bombardment of Japan itself. She is a warship of considerable experience and considerable reputation, known throughout the fleet for her speed. Her commanding officer is Captain Charles Butler McVeigh III, 46 years old, auburn-haired, lean, built like a man who spends his leisure time sailing, which he does, the son and grandson of admirals, a Navy man from a family of Navy men, with a personal manner described by every officer who served under him as warm, direct, and deeply decent. He does not know, on July 15th, exactly what he is about to carry. He knows only that his orders come directly from the highest levels of the War Department, and that he is to proceed with maximum speed to Tinian Island in the Mariana Chain. The cargo arrives at the dock at Hunters Point Naval Shipyard in San Francisco in 2 separate pieces. A wooden crate, roughly the size of a large refrigerator, and a 15-inch steel cylinder that is welded directly to the deck of the captain's cabin. The men who deliver these objects are accompanied by Army scientists who do not carry themselves like military men. They answer no questions. The wooden crate and the steel cylinder are the uranium gun assembly and the enriched uranium core of Little Boy, the first nuclear weapon ever to be used in warfare. IMG-7, 611 crewmen of the USS Indianapolis ship out of San Francisco on the 26th of July. Most of them have no idea what the sealed crate in the hold contains. Some of them speculate. Gold, perhaps, intended for some diplomacy. A new weapon. They are told nothing. The orders are to maintain absolute radio silence for the duration of the voyage. The Indianapolis crosses the Pacific at 30 knots, the fastest passage that route has ever recorded. In 10 days, she covers the distance that normally takes 3 weeks. She arrives at Tinian on July 26th. The cargo is unloaded within hours, transferred to Army Air Force's custody without ceremony, documented in a file that will remain classified for 32 years. 3 weeks later, the weapon will be dropped on Hiroshima. The war will end. In the official histories written afterward, the delivery of the bomb components will occupy a paragraph, a logistical detail in a larger narrative of scientific triumph and strategic decision-making. For the men of the Indianapolis, the story is only just beginning. Margaret Doyle is 43 years old, a widow since 1942, living in a narrow brick house on the east side of Indianapolis, Indiana. She has not slept well in 3 years. Her son, Seaman First Class Raymond Doyle, 20, is somewhere in the Pacific, aboard a Navy heavy cruiser. She knows the name of the ship because Raymond told her before he shipped out, knowing he probably shouldn't have. She gets his letters when they come, weeks delayed, censored in places, sometimes whole lines blacked out so completely that the paper tears through. She reads them under the kitchen lamp and tries to read the sentiment rather than the words. She has a small paper American flag in the front window. Most of the houses on her street do. On July 22nd, she receives a letter postmarked June 19th. Raymond says the weather is hot. He says he has been playing cards with a machinist named Harlan. He says he thinks about her cooking. She folds the letter carefully along its original creases and puts it with the others in the cedar box under her bed. She does not know that on the night she rereads this letter, her son is somewhere in the Philippine Sea, on a ship that the United States Navy has completely forgotten to track. The USS Indianapolis departs Tinian on July 28th. She is bound for Leyte Gulf in the Philippines, where she will join Task Force 95 for further training ahead of the invasion of Japan. The voyage is a routine. McVeigh requests an escort, standard procedure for a vessel transiting waters where Japanese submarines are known to operate, and is told none is available. He requests confirmation that his arrival at Leyte will be expected, and his absence noted if he is late. He receives what amounts to a bureaucratic shrug. The Indianapolis transits the Philippine Sea alone. Commander Mochitsura Hashimoto commands the Imperial Japanese Navy submarine. 58. He is 40 years old, a serious, technically precise officer who has spent the war running underwater patrols through waters increasingly dominated by American naval power. By the summer of 1945, the Imperial Japanese Navy is functionally destroyed. Hashimoto knows this. He keeps his crew focused on procedure and discipline, which is the only thing he can control. He has been operating in the Philippine Sea for several days when his lookouts, at 47 minutes past midnight on July 30th, spot something on the surface. A dark shape, moving at moderate speed, no zigzag pattern. The standard evasive maneuver warships used to complicate targeting by submarines. McVeigh has suspended zigzagging. The sea is rough. It is overcast. He has made a reasonable tactical judgment that the conditions make the maneuver unnecessary. Hashimoto watches the dark shape for 12 minutes. Then he gives the order to fire. 2 Type 95 torpedoes cross the distance between the I-58 and the USS Indianapolis in under 2 minutes. The first strikes the starboard bow. Approximately 300 pounds of Shimo's explosive detonating against the steel hull of a warship produces a sound that 4 men sleeping 2 decks below describe, in later testimony, as the sound of the world splitting down the middle. The forward fuel tanks ignite. The bow section is simply gone, folded backward by the force of the detonation, admitting the Pacific Ocean into the ship's interior at a rate measured in thousands of gallons per second. The second torpedo strikes amidships, beneath the fuel tanks. It ruptures the aviation fuel stores. The Indianapolis does not sink slowly. She does not list and settle and give her crew time to organize. She is a 9,000-ton vessel with her bow destroyed and her fuel on fire, and she goes from afloat to vertical in approximately 12 minutes. No distress signal is sent. The radio room is destroyed by the first explosion before operators can transmit. One officer attempts to broadcast on emergency equipment as the ship is going over, but the signal, if it goes out at all, is received by no one who acts on it. At 12:55 in the morning on July 30th, 1945, the USS Indianapolis completes her turn to vertical and slides beneath the surface of the Philippine Sea. Of the 1,296 men aboard, roughly 900 reach the water alive. In the first hour, it is still dark. The sea surface is covered in burning oil. Men swim through flames to reach open water, their lungs full of smoke, many of them already injured. Blast concussion, broken bones from going over the railing, chemical burns from the fuel. The Indianapolis has left behind a debris field roughly 2 miles long. Life rafts, wooden wreckage, kapok, life jackets. There are not enough life jackets for 900 men. The water temperature is 85 degrees Fahrenheit. This is warm enough to prevent immediate hypothermia. It is also warm enough to sustain marine life in abundance. By dawn, the men have organized themselves into loose groups. The largest group, perhaps 300 men, clusters around a collection of life rafts in the center of the debris field. The rafts are designed for limited occupancy. They cannot hold 300 men. The men hang from the sides, from ropes, from each other. They take turns lying on the wooden slats of the rafts, rotating injured men to the top. Captain McVeigh, who has survived, makes his way to a raft and begins doing what commanders do. He takes inventory. He issues instructions. He projects a calm he does not entirely feel. He tells the men that a ship will come. He believes this. The Indianapolis is expected at Leyte Gulf in 2 days. When she does not arrive, someone will notice. He does not know that the system for tracking arriving vessels at Leyte Gulf is managed by a duty officer who has, that morning, marked all non-arrivals as probably delayed. He does not know that the distress calls, if any were sent, have not been received by anyone with authority to act. He does not know that the United States Navy has, through a combination of administrative indifference and bureaucratic blind spots, effectively lost a heavy cruiser. He tells the men a ship will come. He keeps telling them this through the first day, as the sun climbs to a height that turns the water around them into a mirror of pure white heat. The first shock attack is reported sometime on the morning of the first day. The species present in the Philippine Sea in July 1945 is primarily the oceanic white tip, a deep water shark averaging 6 to 8 feet in length, known by marine biologists as among the most aggressive of open water sharks. An apex predator, entirely comfortable in the presence of large mammalian prey. The Indianapolis has sunk with her contents, food stores, oil, human remains from those who did not survive the initial sinking. The chemical signature in the water is extensive. By first light, the perimeter of the debris field is attended. The sharks do not attack the rafts directly. They work the perimeter of the floating groups, taking men who have drifted slightly apart, men who are injured and bleeding, men who have lost consciousness and slipped below the surface. The attack is described by all survivors with the same word: systematic. Methodical in the way that the feeding of large predators is methodical. Patient, persistent, unhurried. The men cannot fight the sharks. They have no weapons beyond their hands. They try making noise, clustering more tightly, keeping injured men in the center of groups. These measures have partial and inconsistent effect. The attacks continue across all 4 days. What follows is an account of 4 days. It is not continuous. The men who survived it cannot give a continuous account because the experience destroys linear time. What exists instead is a collection of fragments, testimonies recorded months later by men who are still not certain what was real and what the water made them believe. The physical deterioration follows a precise and merciless progression. Day 1. Thirst. The mouth begins to dry within hours of saltwater immersion. By the end of the first day, men with punctured life jackets, men who have been swallowing seawater involuntarily, are experiencing severe dehydration despite being surrounded by water. The irony of this, the cruel abundance of undrinkable fluid, becomes a defining psychological fact of the experience. Some men drink the seawater. They are told not to. They drink it anyway. The thirst is of a quality that overrides rational instruction. Saltwater ingestion accelerates dehydration, causes kidney failure, and produces a specific neurological effect. Hallucinations that are vivid and often pleasant. Men see islands. They see rescue aircraft. They see their wives and mothers on the surface of the water, walking toward them across the flat sea. They swim toward these visions. Day 2. The sun. The July equatorial sun in the Philippine Sea produces surface temperatures the men on rafts can feel through the wood beneath them. There is no shade. There is no shelter. Men develop severe sunburn, progressing to second-degree burns on all exposed skin. The salt water in the wound is not numb. It is precise, specific agony. Day 3. The fracturing of group cohesion. By the third day, the combination of thirst, sun exposure, sleeplessness, shark attacks, and, in some men, the neurological effects of saltwater ingestion produces a breakdown of the social ordering that has kept the groups functional. Men begin to fight over space on the rafts. A rumor spreads. It cannot be traced to a source. That the Japanese are under the water, pulling men down from below. Men attack each other, trying to escape from enemy submarines that do not exist. Officers who have maintained order for 2 days find themselves unable to reach men whose minds have simply fled the situation. McVeigh, on his raft, remains oriented. He knows this is happening. He cannot stop it. The men who have entered delirium number in the dozens by the third day. Some construct highly specific narratives. They are convinced that a hotel is nearby, just beneath the surface, where there is fresh water and food. Groups of men dive for the hotel repeatedly. Some of them do not come back up. The men who remain oriented do what they can. They pull the delirious back to the rafts. They organize watches. They share the few containers of fresh water that have been recovered from the wreckage, distributing it in the most careful measures imaginable. Tablespoons, counted. A machinist named Harlan from Cincinnati passes his allotment to a younger man he does not know and does not record why. In Indianapolis, Indiana, Margaret Doyle is canning tomatoes on the 1st of August. The radio in the kitchen is on. The news is about the continuing air campaign over Japan. She listens with the particular attention of a woman who has learned to pass military communiques for information her son's censor might have missed. The radio says nothing about the Philippine Sea. She will not learn what happened to the Indianapolis for another 6 weeks. When she does, she will learn it from a newspaper. On the morning of the fourth day, August 2nd, Navy Lieutenant Wilbur Gwynn is flying a routine patrol in a PV-1 Ventura bomber over the Philippine Sea. His assignment is anti-submarine patrol. He is not looking for survivors. He is, at the specific moment of discovery, focused on a mechanical problem with his aircraft's trailing antenna. He looks down at the ocean to check his position. He sees oil on the surface, a long, dark smear, and within the smear he sees what he initially takes for a cluster of debris. Then the debris moves. Gwynn drops to low altitude. He radios his base. He drops supplies. He circles and counts. Below him, men who have been in the water for 4 days pull themselves upright, who have been seeing rescue aircraft in hallucination for 3 days and have stopped believing those visions. Look up at this real aircraft circling above them and cannot initially process that it is there. They are 317 men. 900 had gone into the water. The rescue operation that follows Gwynn's discovery is improvised at speed. The kind of operation that works not because of planning, but because individual men make aggressive, correct decisions faster than the system around them can respond. Lieutenant Commander George Atterbury, commanding the seaplane USS Catalina, receives Gwynn's report and immediately diverts to the site. He is not authorized to land in open ocean. The sea state makes an ocean landing dangerous for his aircraft. He lands anyway, shuts down one engine to turn his drifting Catalina into a rescue vessel, and begins pulling men from the water. His plane is eventually carrying 56 survivors, far beyond its structural capacity. He refuses to take off until the surface ships arrive. The surface ships arrive on the evening of August 2nd and into August 3rd. The destroyer escort USS Cecil J. Doyle, commanded by Lieutenant Commander Clayton Doyle, reaches the site first. Doyle directs his searchlight vertically into the sky, a visible column of light to mark the location for other rescue ships and to give the men in the water a fixed point to swim toward. Break time equals, quote, 15 seconds, quote, / greater than. The recovery of individual men from the water takes hours. Many of the survivors cannot climb ladders or nets. Their hands have been in salt water for 4 days, and the skin has the consistency of wet paper. They must be carried up manually, 2 sailors supporting each survivor. Some of the men, on reaching the deck, cannot stand. Some cannot speak. Some do not appear to recognize where they are. The ship's medical officers, faced with a mass casualty event for which no protocol has been written, work through the night on the deck of the Doyle with whatever supplies they have. Severe dehydration, saltwater ingestion, extreme sunburn, shark wounds, blast injuries, psychological collapse. The presentation is consistent enough that it will later become the foundational clinical reference for open water survival medicine. 316 men are recovered alive. 1 dies aboard the Doyle before reaching port. The final survivor count is 316. The Navy's response to the discovery of the Indianapolis survivors is, by any measure, a catastrophic institutional failure compressed into the period of a few days. Questions that should have been asked on July 31st are being asked on August 4th. Why was the Indianapolis not reported overdue? Why did the duty officer at Leyte Gulf not file a report when a heavy cruiser failed to arrive? Why did the naval communication system fail to register, act upon, or even preserve records of possible distress transmissions? The Navy's internal review will find, over the following weeks, that at least 3 separate commands received information consistent with the Indianapolis being in distress, and that each command, for reasons consistent with bureaucratic inertia rather than malice, had filed the information somewhere it was not read. The system had not failed. The system had functioned exactly as it was designed, and the design had proven catastrophically inadequate. This is not the conclusion the Navy presents to the public. Margaret Doyle receives the telegram on August 15th. The war in the Pacific has just officially ended. Japan has announced its surrender, following the atomic bombings of Hiroshima and Nagasaki. The street outside her house is beginning to fill with neighbors, a noise building that will eventually become celebration. She reads the telegram at her kitchen table. Raymond is among the survivors. He is hospitalized at Paleliu. He is alive. She puts her head down on the table surface and does not move for a long time. She will not learn the full story of what Raymond survived until October, when he comes home on leave. He will not tell her all of it. Some of it he will not tell anyone for 30 years. The Navy's public announcement of the Indianapolis disaster is delayed until August 15th, the day of Japan's surrender, releasing the news into a torrent of celebration that reliably diminishes its visibility. The timing is remarked upon, quietly, by the families of the men who did not survive. President Truman is briefed on the disaster in early August. He asks whether the Navy's communication failures played a role in the death toll. He is told the investigation is ongoing. He accepts this. The investigation is ongoing. The United States Navy convenes a court of inquiry in the last week of August. The proceedings last several weeks. The findings identify multiple failures across multiple commands. The absence of arrival reporting procedures at Leyte Gulf, the inadequacy of distress monitoring, the lack of escort provision, the administrative gap through which a 1,200-man warship had been allowed to simply vanish from official attention. The Navy declines to pursue disciplinary action against any of the admirals or senior officers whose decisions contributed to these failures. It charges Captain Charles McVeigh with 2 offenses: failure to issue timely abandoned ship orders and failure to zigzag, which the Navy argues contributed to the submarine attack. McVeigh requests that Commander Hashimoto be brought from Japan to testify. Hashimoto arrives in Washington in December 1945, a former enemy officer traveling by military transport to testify at the court-martial of the man whose ship he sank. He testifies, under oath and via interpreter, that the Indianapolis's failure to zigzag had no effect on the outcome of his attack. He would have been able to fire his torpedoes successfully regardless of the ship's course. His targeting solution was established before the maneuver was relevant. The Navy does not withdraw the charges. McVeigh is found not guilty of the abandoned ship charge and guilty of the zigzag charge. He is sentenced to a loss of 100 points of precedence on the promotion list, a penalty subsequently remitted by the Secretary of the Navy itself, who nevertheless allows the conviction to stand. McVeigh continues to serve. He retires as a Rear Admiral in 1949, but the conviction follows him. Beginning in the 1950s and accelerating through the 1960s, Captain McVeigh begins to receive mail. The letters come from children, school children who have learned about the Indianapolis in class, who have been told that the captain of a ship is responsible for everything that happens aboard it, who have taken this lesson seriously and applied it. The letters describe McVeigh as a murderer. They describe the shark attacks in terms that suggest the children have read accounts. They tell him that he is responsible for the deaths and that he should have died with the ship. They are children. They do not understand exactly what they are writing. McVeigh understands this. and does not stop reading the letters, which arrive by the dozens around the anniversary of the sinking every year. His housekeeper finds him on November 6th, 1968, on the front step of his home in Litchfield, Connecticut. He is holding a toy sailor in one hand. He has died by suicide. He is 70 years old. The investigation into the Indianapolis disaster and into McVeigh's specific culpability versus the systemic failures that actually drove the death toll is largely dormant for 2 decades. It is a 12-year-old boy from Pensacola, Florida, who changes this. Hunter Scott is in the 6th grade in 1996 when his English class is assigned to watch the film Jaws. In one scene, the shark hunter Quint describes, in monologue, surviving the sinking of the USS Indianapolis. Scott asks his teacher about it. He is told it is a fictional film. He goes to the library anyway. He finds the history of the Indianapolis. He is disturbed enough by the history and by the specific injustice of McVeigh's court-martial that he writes a research paper about it. His research paper is read by a Florida congressman. The congressman is sufficiently moved to introduce legislation. On October 12, 2000, the United States Congress passes a resolution stating that the record of Captain Charles McVeigh III should reflect that he was exonerated for the loss of the USS Indianapolis and that he was a victim of a miscarriage of justice. President Clinton signs it into law. McVeigh has been dead for 32 years. Margaret Doyle's son Raymond lives until 2009. He is 84 years old, married, with 3 children and 7 grandchildren. He attends the Indianapolis survivor reunions every year until the reunions end. The last one is held in 2017 in Indianapolis, Indiana, with 8 survivors in attendance. He does not talk, in any setting his grandchildren can remember, about what happened in the water. He talks about the other men. He talks about the machinist named Harlan, who did not survive. He talks about the captain, whom he describes, when he describes him at all, as a good man. The USS Indianapolis is not given a memorial in Washington, D.C. The Naval Monument at Washington lists her name among lost vessels. The city of Indianapolis, Indiana, maintains a memorial to the ship and her crew in a park on the downtown canal. A retired Navy officer visiting the memorial is reported to have said that it is remarkable for a ship of this size and history how few people walk past this memorial and actually stop. At the bottom of the Philippine Sea, at a depth of approximately 18,000 feet, Captain Paul Allen's research vessel Petrel locates the wreck of the USS Indianapolis in August 2017. She is lying on her side on the ocean floor, her back broken, her hull encrusted with 72 years of deep-sea sediment. The bow section, torn away by the first torpedo, is lying several hundred meters from the main hull. The oceanographic team photographs the wreck remotely. The images are extraordinary in their stillness. A ship that fell through 2.5 miles of water at the speed of gravity, striking the seabed with force enough to drive sections of the hull into the mud, now held in perfect cold preservation by absolute darkness and pressure that no living thing survives. The United States Navy designates the site a hallowed ground. No salvage is authorized. No dives are permitted. The ship is left where she is, in the dark, undisturbed. In September 1945, the United States Navy issues a formal communication to the families of the men who died aboard the Indianapolis. The communication explains that their loved ones were lost at sea in the service of their country. It expresses the Navy's profound regret. It does not explain that the Navy failed to notice the ship was missing for 4 days. It does not explain that the survival rate among the men who entered the water might have been substantially different if an alert had been raised within hours rather than days. It does not go into the mechanics of how a bureaucratic system designed for efficiency had classified a missing heavy cruiser as not yet overdue and moved on to other matters. The communication is 1 page long. It is signed by a rear admiral whose name is not otherwise notable in the historical record. Margaret Doyle, whose son came home, unlike the mothers of 880 other men, keeps no record of receiving such a communication. She is not asked for comment when the story is eventually told in full, which it is not until the 1980s. By then, she has been dead for several years. The cedar box with Raymond's letters long since passed to his keeping. The Indianapolis story is ultimately a story about systems, about the architecture of bureaucracy, about the way that large institutions process information, about what happens when the design of a system is optimized for its normal function and nothing else. In the summer of 1945, the normal function of the United States Navy's tracking apparatus was to manage the movement of thousands of vessels across millions of square miles of ocean. Within the context of that enormous operation, one non-arriving heavy cruiser, logged as probably delayed, consumed approximately 45 seconds of a duty officer's attention. The duty officer moved on. The heavy cruiser remained in an administrative category called Not Yet Overdue. 900 men were in the water. The system worked exactly as designed. The design did not account for this. It never does. The United States Navy maintains active service today, managing the movement of vessels across the same waters where the Indianapolis went down. The procedures for tracking non-arrivals have been thoroughly revised. They have been revised specifically because of what happened to the Indianapolis, which means that the men who died in the Philippine Sea in the summer of 1945 have, in a sense, made the passage safer for every sailor who has come after them. This is the consolation offered by institutions to the families of the people who pay for their lessons. Whether it is sufficient consolation is a question the institutions are not in the habit of asking. The Indianapolis carried the bomb that ended the war. She was then left in the water while the Navy filed its paperwork. 880 men died waiting. The captain who survived was court-martialed. The admirals went home.